Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile 1 and 2 discussion. That's right, whilst this is day 4 of PathOfExile 1 teaser season for patch 3.26, there's actually only things that touch on both games today, but they do have a fairly significant impact on PathOfExile 1 as well. So, all of this does not come from Grinding Gear Games' usual official teasers announcements. Instead, it comes from an interview that Talkative Tri did with Jonathon from Grinding Gear Games. Now, during this, they talked on a number of issues. I'm only touching the things that affect both games here. I will put a link down in this video's description if you want to check out the entirety of the discussion that Talkative Tri had with Jonathon. It is quite interesting. It's probably 85% PathOfExile 2 focused, 15% focused on both games simultaneously. The first thing was an interesting one where they talked about a big design decision that PathOfExile 2 took that reversed something that was done in PathOfExile 1. And this was a decision for how unique items drop in PathOfExile 2. In PathOfExile 1, it's something the player base figured out back in Harvest League, that the game first decides you've been awarded a unique item or you've not been awarded a unique item, and only then does it decide which item you actually get. So for instance, maybe on the first monster that you kill, you're awarded a unique item, and then that turns out to be Astramentis. Then the next monster you kill, you're awarded a non-unique item, let's say it's a rare item, and then the game decides, okay, you're awarded a rare map. Now the order of operations is really important because they changed this in PathOfExile 2. In PathOfExile 2, the first thing that's decided is, congratulations, you've got an amulet. And then the second thing that's decided is, oh, okay, by the way, it's unique. This is the reason Astramentis was so unbelievably rare in PathOfExile 2 as a monster drop. Now, most of the Astramentis that existed in trade were not actually generated by monster drops. They were generated by orbs of chance being applied to stellar amulets. That's because amulets are by far the rarest base type in PathOfExile 2. And in order to get an Astramentis, the first roll needed to come up, congratulations, you've got an amulet. And then on top of that, the second roll needed to come up, congratulations, not only have you got a unique, but you've got one of the rarer categories of uniques. Now, they're changing this in PathOfExile 2, bringing it back to the way that it works in PathOfExile 1. This is going to have a very big impact on the number of Astramentis that exist, because Jonathon did a number of simulations where he found out that the frequency of Astramentis dropping in PathOfExile 2 as a monster drop, we're not talking about making it with an orb of chance, but as a monster drop, it was 45,000 times rarer than the Divine Orb. So that's something that's a little bit interesting. PathOfExile 1 though, really this is just Grinding Gear Games confirming for the first time what players had worked out way back in 3.12. If you're interested, the way it was worked out in 3.12, that the order of operations worked that way, was that there were ways that you could get ridiculously juiced maps that would have every single item that dropped in that upgraded to a unique item, and you would run maps that had that sort of setup, but you would do so on maps that had very common divination cards, such as Reign of Chaos, and you would find that you got absolutely 0 copies of Reign of Chaos. You got absolutely 0 Wisdom Scrolls, 0 Portal Scrolls, and that was the way that it was proved that the game decided first you got a unique item, and only then did it decide what that unique item would be. So that's the things about drop rates that were discussed. The second thing that affects both games though, and it's probably more important, was the discussion of release cadence. This is Grinding Gear Games' plan going forwards, and a little bit on how they're planning to implement it. Their plan is that they will alternate releases, and that each game will get a major patch every 4 months. So previously, PathOfExile 1 had been on a 3-month release cadence. They're looking to make it a 4-month release cadence going forward. They don't think they can pull off 3. And on top of that, they're planning to start this right now. So the plan currently is that in June, we get 326. In August, we get 030. In October, we get 327. In December, we get 040. They also call it 040, not 100, and so that is something that implies where they're intending to go in the future of PathOfExile 2 and the official release. That is probably going to be a 2026 release for the full game, rather than them bringing it forward and calling 040, changing it to be called 100. The last thing that they discussed, and I'm only going to quickly touch on this, watch Tri's interview if you want more info on this. They talked about some of the project management changes that Grinding Gear Games have made after some of the recent delays. And their plan is now that their goal is to set a date in stone first, and then allow features to fall off if they're not ready by that date. In the past, they've been setting the feature scope first, and then allowing that to dictate the date. So for instance, when the Huntress took much longer than expected, that meant that they fell way behind on 020, but also that caused the blowout in 326. And that under the new system, they would have simply launched 020 Sans Huntress, and then 326 would likely have been earlier than it was. Anyways, I wanted to keep today's video quick, and also I've mentioned in the past that I've been changing my thumbnail backgrounds to be black if it's PathOfExile 1 related, and to be some sort of bright color if it's PathOfExile 2 related. The rare times that it's both games like this, I'll try and do some sort of mix like I've done in this video. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, whether you play PathOfExile 1, 2, or both.